Cindy and Fred Allejos. Cindy, a few moments ago, you were telling about how the Solises were quite poor, and tell me the story about them picking crops. I've never heard that story.
Yeah, so they would go north and they would pick crops, and the older kids would all go and help, and so would their parents because they didn't have money, and that's how they made a living. They would help their parents in picking crops, and the older kids would do it, and then I guess at one time there was some babies, and of course they couldn't do it, but the older kids would pick crops.
So, when you were growing up, what did the Obancho say about the early Solis years? What memories do you have about Old Laredo?
So we would visit Laredo quite often. My father really liked to be there for his parents, and so I feel like every other weekend, either we were at Kelly Park having a picnic with the Solises that lived in San Antonio, or we were in Laredo visiting our grandparents. And we would go when my dad got out of work on Friday night, and we would get there late at night. And no matter what time we arrived, Grandma always had chorizo and huevo and homemade tortillas ready for us. I mean, she knew what we wanted, and she always had like breakfast tacos waiting for us.
So, our grandfather Solis and our grandmother Aurora Solis, how do you think their example influenced their children?
I think they were very hard workers, and just like everybody, as you see your parents that they work so hard, you also, they lead by example. It's definitely true. We saw it in our parents, and we see it in our children that they work just as hard as we have. So it's kind of neat, and I think that they probably saw how hard their parents worked, and to provide for them, to provide for everybody.
Now, your father, Theo Pancho, was very outgoing, very opinionated. My father was also opinionated, but he was also reserved. How would you describe the relationship between your father, my Theo Pancho, Juan Solis, and my father?
I remember one time I'm talking to your dad, and I was complaining about how stern my father was, and my father wants to tell everybody what to do. And your dad shared a story where he said, I was buying my first car, and I wanted this cute little red car. And your dad said, no, Joe, we're going home with the white car. And we went home with the white car. And I was like, oh my God, all his life he's told people what to do. It's just, he was the oldest, and that's how he thought he was helpful in helping people make good choices.
How did the two of them interact? Do you ever remember how they interacted among all of the brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I remember my father was so proud of Uncle Joe, the fact that he went to A&M, and the fact that he worked at General Dynamics, and my father was just very, very proud of him. And anybody he spoke to, he would tell them how proud he was of Uncle Joe.
Super, super. Now, Fred, you had told me the story about how my father visited San Antonio, and you were able to host him, and for you it was a big honor. Why was it an honor for you?
It was, I don't know. I like you said, I held him here, your father, and everything that we had always talked about, and her father, Theo Joe, was, this great guy, just successful, the hospitals he built, just everything that he was involved with, everything he touched was, like the goose that laid the golden egg.
Yeah.
And so for him to humble himself and come stay with us in our meager 2-bedroom
Duplex.
duplex in San Antonio that was right off of 410.
Yeah.
I mean, it was nothing special, but you could talk to him, and you could sit there and converse with him, and there would be nothing that gave you an indication that he was uncomfortable. He was always at home. He was always kind. He was always generous, just down to earth. So everything that I ever thought of him wasn't just here,
Super.
He was on my level.
Super.
So,
And the pizza, there was a pizza that, what was that combination again?
We went to Pizza Hut, and he's like, "We've got to order pizza with jalapenos and pepperonis," and we're like,
yeah, we didn't
Oh,
order. It was we were not involved in the ordering. It was we were told what we were a la Solis. We were told what we were eating, and we're like, oh, jalapenos and pepperoni. Okay, yeah, never had that before.
You know, my mom had said in a group chat in my father's final days that in many ways, all of you, my primos, were like his kids because for you all, he was a connection to your parents. And my question is that must have been a cool experience being able to communicate with him over, via text. And because out of all of these siblings, my father and Tio Rene are the last ones, out of this chain. So that must have been like a really cool thing for you.
Yeah, it was very cool. He always gave us good stories and gave us good advice, and he always cared for us. And and
He was a storyteller too.
he would take time to wish us happy birthday and send us money, and it was just touching. And it wasn't the money or the amount; it was that he took time to do it.
Sweet. Now, was there, from your experiences with my grandparents, my Solis grandparents, that I never had a chance to meet, unfortunately, would you say my father had characteristics from one versus another one? In now that you look back,
I could say that he had both of them because he was quiet and reserved in some aspects, which was like my grandpa, very quiet and reserved, but very caring. But yet he was like my grandma, where, he could tell us stories and reflect and just remind us of stuff. He would remember different people's anniversary of their death, and he would remind all of us, I mean, it wasn't just our parents or grandparents, but it was other family members also. So that kind of kept us all going.
super. So when you look back at all of the Solis siblings, how on earth did they live under one roof? You think about all those personalities, just Tio Neto. I mean, Tio Raul, like these were vibrant personalities. Did you ever contemplate, how did they all live under one roof? That must have been unique.
Yeah, it must have been quite an experience.
They probably did everything your dad said.
It probably was quite an experience,
Tio Rene told me a story that Tio Neto would go out so often that our grandmother Solis put a dress on him one day. So he would be ashamed to leave the house, and he literally left with the dress on.
That's hilarious. I've never heard that story. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and you, when you think about it, in the end, that's all we really have are stories, right? These unique opportunities. Now, the two of you, what's really cool for me to hear is that y'all lived in Alaska, you lived in different parts of Texas, but you still had that connection to my father over all those years.
Yeah. That's kind of the neat thing. Like, no matter where we were at, no matter what we were doing, he always kept in contact. I remember when we had our first child, he came to visit, and he got mad at me because I was saying, okay, you come down De Zavala, and you come down De Zavala, and then you're going to come to Northwest Military. So when he got to my mother-in-law's house where we were staying, he said, "Como que De Zavala? It's De Zavala." And I'm like, "No, in San Antonio we say De Zavala." And he was getting mad at me.
Instead of De Zavala,
Wow.
Oh, sorry.
But I mean, he said it like he was getting mad, but he said it in a joking way.
Yeah.
Are there any other early Solis experiences where y'all either visited Laredo and had contact with certain family members, and any stories that involved everyone that come to mind right now? Like, that was I never knew this about this family member or that family member, outside of my father, or with my father in that group.
I guess from the early years, so everybody in Laredo, when they would get married, they would go across to Nuevo Laredo, and their weddings were always so extravagant and different. And and the whole family would be there. And I think I have very fond memories of different cousins and different aunts and uncles that got married, and the weddings were just so extravagant. Back then you would have a sit down meal, and you would sit down and they'd give you a little like fruit salad, and then they'd give you like a regular salad, and then they'd give you the whole meal, and then they'd come with dessert. And so being in Mexico for those weddings, it was just so special and so different.
Sweet, sweet. I love the story how you mailed my father his wedding cocktail napkin. That must have been a thrill when he got that.
Yeah. I said, when my parents passed away, we were cleaning out their house, and I found the napkin that was from your mom and dad's wedding, and so I sent it to him. And then I also shared with him before he passed that I had his commencement program from 1970 when he got his master's degree from Texas A&M. And when I found it, I was just so happy and so proud, and I shared it with him through our text, and so all of the cousins got to see it.
Cool. Did he know you had that?
He knew I had that. Yeah.
Sweet.
He knew I had that.
Oh, fantastic.
And I had told him, I'm going to put it in the mail to you, and I just had never done it. So now it's yours.
Thank you so much for that. In the past 10 to 15 years, as my father got older and as we all aged, how did you stay in contact with my father? Was it by phone, text is relatively new, let's say the past 10 years, but how was the communication? How did that take place?
Mostly by either I would go visit him. Lots of times I would stop by the shop when they had the shop at Wonderland. We would go and visit. And then I also stopped at the shop that they currently have. And but then later in life, like I would say in the last 10 years, it's been all by text, which is really neat because we have that history that, that we can continue and look at. And I was looking, right after he passed away, I was looking at all of the texts that we have. And it's just wonderful because the stories he shared, those are things that I'll remember forever.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for just treating him in such a loving manner. When you contemplate like the Solis lineage from our grandfather Solis, Aurora Solis, are there certain Solis traits that you have seen over the decades that have passed down in terms of like a certain look, a certain attitude? Like, are there any things that stand out? And did my father have specific ones that you would say, oh, that was obvious?
Well, I can say that the Solis genes are really strong. and so we say like we always say that people from Laredo have big heads. And when our daughter was born, they told us, everything looks good, but her head is rather large. And I was like,
they were worried about hydrosyphilis. And we're like, it should be fine.
I said, my father has a big head.
Quite the large head.
But the looks, seriously, like I have a lot of Solis in me. I look more like my father's sisters than, my mom. And my children, they look more like me. And my daughter's children, they have a lot of Solis. So the Solis gene is very, very strong.
My son, off topic, on topic, my son took a picture of himself. And there's an app where you can show what you'll look like when you get older. The picture of my son and Mr. Solis are identical.
Incredible.
Crazy. We're like crazy identical. When he sent it to us, we're like, oh.
You look like your grandpa.
Oh my gosh.
Staggering.
Splitting image.
Staggering.
Yeah.
Cindy, with your father's vivacious personality, like where did he get so much energy? Because on one hand, his mother was very reserved and his father was also reserved. How is it your father became such a political activist? He was always writing the Express News and opinionated and expressing his opinions. So where do you think he got that from?
I think because they grew up so poor that they all aimed high because they wanted to say, not that they wanted to be better, but they wanted to get themselves educated and have a good life. And I think that all of them in their own way succeeded at that. they all worked hard, and they're all people of service. And I think that that's one of the things that I'm very proud of as a Solis, that we come from a family of service that want to give back.
Beautiful. So, just for the sake of context and also to educate me, can you go over your father's history and from Laredo to Trinity University, correct? Can you go over that history? Because I think it's an amazing history.
Sure, sure. So my father joined the military. He was in the army, and he went to Japan, and he was stationed there. And then when he came back from Japan, he got out of the military and he got accepted to Trinity University. And he was always very grateful to his cousin Lydia, because his cousin Lydia allowed him, Lydia and John Squire. Lydia was his cousin. She was married to John Squire, and they had 2 children, Ellen and John Jr. And Lydia allowed my father to come live with them. And that's how he put himself through Trinity and got his education. And my father also, he was going to go to law school at St. Mary's University. He got accepted, but then he didn't actually go through it. I'm not sure why, but I did find his ID from St. Mary's University. Amazing. So I have that also. And he met my mother. He worked at HEB on Commerce Street as he was going to school, and that's where he met my mother. And my mother, she had 3 children from her previous marriage, Emma, Sylvia, and Bobby. And then when my parents married, the oldest was in 2nd grade, and then they had 3 more children, Nina, who's named after Grandma Aurora, and Juan and myself. And so, yeah, everybody was raised in one big household.
Super. So after Trinity University, what type of work did he, was it civil service?
My father went into civil service, and he worked at Kelly Air Force Base, and then he moved on to Fort Sam, and he ran the Equal Opportunity Program there at Fort Sam, which is kind of crazy, but being that he was so opinionated.
Yeah.
But yeah, he ran that program for many years before he retired.
Yeah, at my father's birthday, I shared the story how, so Theo Pancho and I had very limited points of contact, but those points, those very limited ones, were fantastic for me. And one of them was your father taking me, I don't know why we went to Foley's, and we were like looking at all the bargains and the bargain basement stuff. And he knew where to find like the 90% off stuff. And I was like, man, Theo, like this is impressive. And then we go to the parking lot, he had 2 big bags, and he opens his trunk and he shows me all of this stuff. He says, look at Joey, I'm always ready for birthdays, anniversaries. And it's crazy because I have the same custom. Like you go to my house right now, I've got gifts for the next 2 years. And I'm curious about like that mindset. It was almost like a scarcity mindset. I better buy something now because I might not. Did he have that mindset where, because you never know if you're going to have money or not, like he was always looking for bargains and he was always looking like, what's your take on that?
I think he was always looking for a bargain, so he wasn't pressed for time. And if he waited till the last minute, he'd have to buy something that wasn't on sale, and then he'd feel like, oh, I didn't get a good bargain. So he always bargain shopped so he would be ready and wouldn't have to pay full price. So he was always thinking ahead, right?
Plus, he gave a lot of that away.
Yeah. And like he would come over and bring us like, oh, the tomato sauce was on sale. Here's a dozen cans, or here's a case of tomato sauce. And we'd be like, what are we going to do with a dozen cans of tomato sauce?
So he was almost doing like Sam's Costco shopping and saying, if I can share. And you bring up an interesting point, which is it was never about himself, right? It was like, how can I share this with others? And that has to come from that those early days of being poor.
Yeah. When we lived, I have to share this story. When we lived in Alaska, he needed to figure out how he could send us some stuff. So he thought about it and he said, well, the guard at Kelly Air Force Base they go to Alaska all the time. I'm going to go talk to them. So he went over there and he talked to them. And he said, hey, can I send my daughter a package and you can deliver it to her in Alaska? So they said, yeah, okay. So he prepared a huge box. It was a lawnmower box. And he put tortillas, fajitas, Big Red, spices, everything we could ever want. And then they called Fred. And
Yeah. Fortunately, when I was in Alaska, I worked in my duty section was called Transit Alert. So we received all transient aircraft coming into the base. So I had an opportunity to take advantage of that situation. So they would call our office, say, hey, I'm looking for, well, that's me. And I'd use our government truck and I'd run out to whatever location they were at and unload the big lawnmower box onto our truck and bring it back and throw it into my truck and come home and drop off this plethora of, goodies that Mr. Solis had sent us from San Antonio. And people would look at me like, what? Who does that?
I love that. I love that. In reference to your mother, my Tia Grace, she had this aura, and I didn't have a lot of contact with her, but she had this aura of just being so elegant, so graceful, and also just so much in control. And that must have been a unique experience. You have a father who's very all enthusiastic, bombastic, and then you have a mother who's just very businesslike. Like she was very businesslike. Is that a correct description of her?
Yeah, my mother, she was a firecracker, definitely. And my father, he worked hard. He went to work every day, but he'd come home and he'd take a nap and he'd get fed and then he'd rest and he'd read and maybe watch a little TV. But it was our mother who was the center of our world, and she taught us to ride bikes, how to swim, how to fish. She would do the grilling. She did everything for us.
The equalizer.
And that was a big responsibility because you're talking about raising 5 different children.
Yeah, we were 6.
6.
Yeah,
oh my
we
God,
were
6.
six.
Oh, that's right, 6. That's
Yeah.
right. Over the years, because we were in I was originally in Laredo and then later in San Antonio, I didn't have those wonderful experiences with you. It was only in the mid-'80s when your brother was running for office that I campaigned for him. So in many ways, all of these stories are new to me, completely new. When you think about those San Antonio years with all of your siblings and Johnny running for office, what were those years like for you? Because it must have been, I'm probably sure it wasn't boring.
Yeah, I wasn't really into politics, but because it was a family member, you had to participate.
Yeah, that big bus, that was an amazing bus.
So,
what's the story of that? Who bought that bus or who acquired that bus? It was a big Via bus for Solis.
I think one of their friends, one of Juan's friends, owned a bus company, and so they were able to borrow a bus for a lot of the campaigning. But it was fun. It was fun to all be together as a family to help him, and it's unique. Politicians are unique people, and it's not something that everybody can do. So it's kind of neat that he was able to experience that. I don't think anybody in our family could ever do that other than him.
Yeah. So Cindy, over the years, and Fred, your interactions with Tia Beba, Tia Lucy, here in San Antonio, and also Tio Raul, are there any stories that come to mind how the siblings were together or how they interacted, and any stories that come to mind? Because I remember visiting Tia Beba at gyms on Broadway. I would go see her. I was teaching a citizenship class as a volunteer, and I would go visit her every Thursday night. And that was my only connection to the old Solis stories. But any stories that come to mind about those siblings?
Oh, yeah. So early in life, we always went to Kelly Park, and we would have picnics every other Sunday. We were at Kelly Park with the Solises, and it would be Tio Raul Solis's family and our family, and sometimes Tia Lucy would come and Tia Beva, but we would do that with the Solises a lot. And then of course, every year, New Year's parties at the Raul Solis family, those are big. And everybody went. That was the thing to do, to go to the Raul's for New Year's Eve. And so we all look forward to that. And I loved going to the Solises because my father, he was very strict, and he watched his money. He was very tight with his money. So we didn't get real ice cream. We got this plain ice cream. It wasn't even ice cream, it was ice. It was called Millerine. It wasn't real ice cream. But when you went to the Solises, they had butterscotch ice cream and peppermint ice cream. So I loved going over there because I got the real stuff, and then they had the neatest toys. They had a pogo stick, and we got basic stuff, and we got an alarm clock for Christmas. And they would get fun stuff.
A lump of coal.
They would get fun stuff. So I always was let's go to the Solises because they got fun stuff. And they had, to me, it seemed like they had more kids because by then it was just Nina, Juan, and I, and they had more kids. So it was fun to be around a bunch of cousins. But Tia Beva, oh my God. So she used to have a Volkswagen Bug. You know how small they were, right? And she would, on her days off, she was a waitress at the Holiday Inn downtown, and on her days off, she would take us to Canyon Lake. And in that Volkswagen Bug, she would put me, Michelle, Curtis, Juan, and Nina, and herself. All of us, we got that Volkswagen Bug, and we would go to the lake. And I don't know how we all fit. They would stuff me in the very back.
And that's a 40-minute drive.
Yeah.
With no AC, right? I mean,
oh no, we had AC,
you had AC.
But we were so squished together because she wanted to take us to the lake, and that was her car, and so we would all get in her car and go.
Man, oh man! Now, did you have a similar interaction with Tia Lucy, or was she kind of did she do her own thing?
No, later in life, Tia Lucy, later in life, she was our organizer, and she would say, "Okay, we're gonna have a reunion," and so we'd say, okay, we'll have a reunion. And she said, okay, I want you to do this. I want you to do that. I want you to, and she would assign us all like a true Solis. She would just tell us exactly what to do. And then so we would have these reunion meetings, and she'd say, okay, I'm going to have the reunion meeting at my house, and I'm going to make the chicken, and you're going to bring the salad, and you're going to bring the bread, and you're going to bring the drink. And I want you to go and bring me up apple pie from Jim's. And she would tell us exactly what to bring, and we'd all say, okay, Tia, okay, and then we would all show up and be there.
That sure simplifies things, right? You have your marching orders.
Yeah.
Don't question, just do it, and we'll get it done.
And then later in life, she would call me, and I was working kind of over by Southtown, and she lived over by North Star Mall, and she would call me, and she'd say, Cindy, are you busy? Okay. Well, I need a pizza from Pizza Hut, and I already ordered it. Go pick it up and bring it to me. And I said, okay, Tia, I'll go. And so I would go on my lunch hour and take her pizza. And then one time, Uncle Joe got wind that I was doing that, and he told her, stop calling Cindy on her lunch hour. She doesn't even live close by here. He says, you call me, and I'll go take you. So then he started doing things for her.
Really? Isn't that incredible?
And then she would call me, too, and she'd say, okay, can you come and go to I want you to go to TJ Maxx, and I want you to go buy me some stuff for my grandchildren for Christmas. I said, okay, I can do it. I already picked it, and I'll tell you exactly what I want. And I'm like, okay, I can do it. And so I would go do it, and then she'd send me to JCPenney's to pay her bill, or okay, I want to buy this from JCPenney's, but use this card, and this card. I'd say, okay, and I'd go do it for her.
I love it. Now, Tio Neto primarily lived in Laredo. Did he visit San Antonio often, or would you have to go and see him in Laredo?
He would come sometimes, but we would go visit them quite a bit. When we would go to Laredo, we would make our rounds. We would go see we would, of course, we would stay with Grandma and Grandpa, but then we would go see Tia Sofia, and then we would go see Tio Neto, and then we would go see the other people that lived in Laredo.
Super, super. And in reference to your Tia Sofia, who what our grandmother Aurora Solis was her mother, and her father had passed away before our grandfather Solis came around. Any memories of your Aunt Sophia?
Oh yeah, she made the best pot roast, and they would tell her that we were coming, and she would make us a pot roast, and she would make a pot of rice, and her husband, he owned a bakery, La Renera, and we would go over there and get sweet bread, and he was really a sweet man, and very, very nice. He was Tio Juan Gonzalez.
So growing up, you had this cast of characters that kept you entertained all the time.
Yes.
From running errands for Tia Lucy to dealing with your father's unique city council outburst and expressing his opinion. So you probably know it was probably not a boring childhood.
No, it wasn't boring.
She was ready to go.
It wasn't a boring childhood.
Wow.
It was fun being around all your cousins. That's why later in life, when you don't really see your cousins or talk to them, it's kind of sad because you were so close as children. I think Fred experienced that too. You know, your cousins are your first best friends, and then you kind of grow apart. But it's fun to remember the good times.
The good times, yeah.
Fred, I wanted to ask you over the years, your interaction with my father at events. Do you ever recall any interesting things that he may have said to you? Like, wow, that's an interesting thing to say. Anything come to mind?
I think it was his just kind of out of nowhere jokes, you know. You know, we have that one about Tuculo. I'm trying to keep it B-rated, but
He told us a joke about Tacula, Texas, but
yeah.
it turned dirty.
No, Cotula, Texas,
Yeah.
not Tucula. The joke was about Cotula, Texas, and
Yeah.
that this lady or the man was asking the lady, "Tu culo está grande or tu culo está chica?" because he didn't know how to say Cotula. Well, and your father was, I mean, he always had these quips, you know. You're like, where did this come from? You know, and he would laugh. And I think, you know, majority of my interaction with him was, you know, of course, social, because he was, when we come into town to visit him, he was just so excited to entertain and, you know, show us a good time. And he, of course, he loved Cindy, and, you know, I was part of that, you know, that package. But, you know, his sense of humor was probably what stood out the most to me, you know, and just being a good person. You know, I never saw him mad. You know, if you did something that he didn't agree with, there was a very, very metered way he would present his opinion, you know, so you would understand it. And if you weren't smart enough to do that, you probably should have been in the conversation with him.
And I'm sure those jokes, when you throw in a few beers,
I'm
sure they were crazy
yeah.
conversations. I was always amazed how Tio Pancho, your father, Tio Neto, and my dad, the way they could entertain themselves for hours telling old stories that were going back 50, 60 years. So they never even they never had a need to watch TV. They would just sit around and share stories or war stories.
Yeah.
I can remember back when y'all lived in Fort Worth, Grandma was going to go see y'all, Grandma Solis, and they decided she needed a travel companion, and it was me. So I got to go with her in the airplane, which is really kind of funny because back then I understood Spanish, but I didn't speak it. But they sent me with her to get her to Fort Worth, and I must have been, I don't know, 12 years old.
Wow.
And 12, 13. And so I went with Grandma to y'all's house, and I can picture the house. It was beautiful, and I remember that, and maybe you'll remember this. I don't remember how old you were at the time, but when you walked in, there was a formal living room and a formal dining, and then you swung around, and there was like a kitchen area, and then there was like a, I don't even know what to call it, like a pit.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Your
Something.
living room sunk down. Like, and I don't know if it was like a den or what, but I remember like, wow, I've never seen in a house like this. It was amazing. I mean, y'all had this huge house in White Settlements. That was the name of your subdivision.
You remember the name?
I remember the name.
White Settlements?
White Settlements.
Fascinating.
Yes, and it was a beautiful house, you know what I mean? Coming from the west side of San Antonio to White Settlements, I was like, whoa, they have a lot of money. But I remember your mom would make us snacks. She would make us chips and dips. Like she would do chips and dips for us for a snack, and I was just like in heaven because you know I love chips and dips. And then she would make us chocolate pies for dessert. And I was like, I want to live here forever.
Incredible. So I was not even aware of that trip, so I hope I behaved myself. I must have been 3 years old or 4 years old. How old was I?
I don't know how old y'all were. Y'all were young, but I don't remember. I guess we'll have to figure out our age difference.
Yeah. And do you remember the relationship between our grandmother Aurora Solis and my father? What do you ever remember that dynamic?
Yeah. I mean, your father loved his mother. I mean, they all loved their mother, and you know, showed a lot of respect and wanted to be around her. And that was one of the reasons that she flew to Fort Worth to visit with your parents. You know, I think we stayed a week or something.
Wow, that was a nice little
Yeah.
stretch. And what was our grandmother Aurora Solis's impression of Fort Worth? Because I presume that was the first time she'd ever been there. 'Cause, like, who travels to Fort Worth, right?
Right. I don't remember what her impression was. I just remember being with her.
Super. And from her personality traits, what are some of the takeaways that you would want your children and grandchildren, my children and future grandchildren to know about our grandmother Solis and also our grandfather? Are there any like things that they would want to know about those personalities? Because you grew up with them and I never did.
I guess just that they were kind, giving people, and like I said, we're definitely a family of service, and I think it stems from them. They would help anybody who needed help. They were always willing to cook for somebody, to help somebody. They were just very loving people.
Now, a few moments ago, you shared a story about how my uncle, or our uncle, Tío René, and my father would literally consume butter before going out and having some drinks because it would prevent them from getting drunk.
Yeah, that's a story. My older sister, Emma, you know, I of course, we all kept all our family in you know, and with updates about Theo Joe, and Theo Joe's not doing so good. Theo Joe's in ICU. You know, pray for Theo Joe. And so they would all do it. And then once he passed, we told them he passed, and they were sharing stories. And Emma said she recalls when she was a teenager that they would go to Laredo, and that she remembers Uncle Joe and Tío René consuming large amounts of butter so they wouldn't get drunk when they went out drinking.
Incredible. Wild. Just wild.
Well, if it worked.
And one of the stories that I told Uncle Joe, and he always loved this story, and we would always laugh about it, was when I was young, my father, after Grandma died and after Tia Beba wanted to branch out on her own, my father bought a house across the tracks from where we lived on the same street, and it was for his mother. And so he bought a house, and my grandmother moved in there. And so she lived across the street from where we lived. And so she would walk to the grocery store, and she would step at our house, and she'd say, "Do you want to come?" And I'd say, "Okay, I'll go with you." So I would walk with her to the Handy Andy, and we'd go to the produce, and she'd start picking the grapes, and she She wanted to taste them before she bought them, and I'd be like, Grandma, don't do that. They're gonna arrest you. And I was like so embarrassed that she was eating the fruit, and I told Uncle Joe that story, and he would always remember that story, and he would laugh. He goes, remember that time when Grandma would eat the fruit and you thought she was going to get arrested? I said, yeah, I was little, and I was embarrassed that she was eating the fruit before she paid for it. But she's like, you got to taste it to see if they're sweet.
Your dad did that when he'd go to the La Fiesta. It was like the modern day HEB food tasting stations. Picking the fruit.
Cindy, what do you recall about the relationship between our grandparents when the two of them were together? Were there any unique things in the way they interacted with each other with such a large family?
I don't remember a whole lot. I remember that Grandma, of course, ran the household, and then I remember Grandpa. He was the one that would take us to Nuevo Laredo to buy the supplies that we needed to buy. And Grandma would stay home, and whoever wanted to stay with Grandma could stay with Grandma. But I always went to Nuevo Laredo with my parents and with Grandpa. And I always tease Juan because Juan, he never wanted to go, and he would stay with Grandma. And then one time somebody asked him, Juan, why don't you come to Laredo with us? And he said, because I don't know Spanish, and maybe I get stuck over there and nobody will bring me back. So he never wanted to go because he didn't speak Spanish.
Wow. Fred, I wanted to ask you in reference to your civil service and working in law enforcement and coming into the Solis family. Were there times that somebody would ask you, a Solis family member was curious about what you did and some of the stories? What family members were interested in what you did for the state of Texas?
Well,
Thea Lucy said he was a paratrooper.
A paratrooper? Where did that come from? Oh, from your military experience?
Yeah.
No,
Well,
she thought a paratrooper and a trooper were the same thing.
Oh,
I mean, a
because
paratrooper.
I love it. I
never disputed what she said.
And then somebody else got upset, and they said, women and children in cages. And then we were like, what? And then somebody else interjected and said, he's not a border patrol, he's a state trooper.
Oh, how fascinating.
So when we left Saudi after 9/11, we got back here. I didn't want to do that anymore. I was an aircraft mechanic, and the majority of those guys are arthritic and broke down and just, they drink coffee until 10 in the morning so they can get moving. You get old quick. So I told her I need to get out of this work. So I got into law enforcement. I started with Bexar County here in San Antonio initially, and had applied with DPS just before I got accepted with Bexar County. So I went through the Bexar County Academy, which was actually really pretty good for a small, what I consider a small agency. San Antonio is considered, small market, and Bexar County is a small agency. It's grown since, but after I graduated, I was on the floor for a month, and DPS called, and that's not a phone call you turn down. They offer you a job, you don't turn DPS down. It's just, it's the largest policing agency in the state of Texas. They're very, very advanced in all their training. Just everything that they do is the best. So for me, that was the best thing that I could do. So I accepted the job, and I went to Austin for 6 months. I lived in Austin at the academy. So when I came back, her dad was real happy. He was ecstatic that I did that. But
they were very proud.
Yeah, they were pretty proud. But I got stationed down at Karnes County, which was basically a crop picking county. Back, and it still is. They're known for their oil and crops. But when I first started, your family really didn't know what I did. So everybody was standoffish about what I did, other than like Dolores. Dolores was always very inquisitive. Her oldest brother's wife, and she would always ask the same questions, about what did I do, and I try to tell them. And so after I was with DPS for years, it was nobody ever asked anything. To be honest with you, they just, I don't know, they weren't concerned, or they didn't. It wasn't something that they felt that they needed to know about.
Yeah.
But at one point, I remember when Paco and Chela were younger, they would ask questions. If anybody would ask questions, they would ask questions. Hey, Theo Fred. Hey, Theo Fred. So all my arrests were either back in the old days, were on VHS. And as we became more technologically, smarter and advanced, things were put on DVDs. And even now, everything just, it's in the cloud, all their videos. So I started bringing home videos, and I would let Paco and Chela see them, and they were just blown away at some of the things. I never brought them any of the real meaty ones, things that were more. I would let them see comical things, because I didn't want to subject the family to the stuff that I dealt with. But it was pretty interesting. I learned a lot. When I first started, I was so naive. Gosh, I was probably because of course I'm married to her, and she's a good person, just overall, and I thought everybody was like that. I was naive, and it didn't take me long to realize that there are a lot of very bad people.
Wow, that must have been a big wake-up call.
It was.
Because you're talking about human nature.
Yeah, exactly. I just didn't realize that people could be that bad. Even the good people. And I don't want to go into details, but there's people that I was blown away that they were as bad as they were. It stunned me. I'm like, God bless.
And you would have to deal with those issues on a daily basis, on an hourly basis.
On a daily basis.
Wow.
Yeah. But as far as, I didn't really get a lot of questions from the family. My kids, I discussed stuff with them, and they were privy to some of the arrests because we lived in a small town. I was arresting people in front of our house. We had somebody try to break into the house, so I chased this guy down and arrested him, and dark 30 in the morning. So it was.
Or you were arresting their parents.
Yeah, or I was arresting my children's parents and
their
family
friends.
members and brothers and sisters, and they all heard about it, and the next Monday morning. So it was not like I could hide anything, but it was.
I remember one time, Annie's friend, he told Annie, "Well, your dad stopped me last night," and Annie said, "Well, what were you doing?" "I'm sure my dad didn't stop you just to stop you."
Amazing. So, Fred, when you married into our Solis family and all the primos, was there anything that stood out that was new and surprising to you that you just thought, wow, this is different?
Oh, it was all different. I was blown away. I came from a very, very conservative family. I wouldn't, it's not uptight. They were just, my family's very quiet and, not regimented or anything, but they're just quiet, and we do things quietly and reserved. And they're my mom and dad are very well to do. They have everything they need, but everything is still just really, really low key. So growing up, we were at polar opposites. So, and I joke because like when Fiesta was on, Dad was, they'd give him time off. Hey, what do you guys want to do? You want to go Fiesta or you want to go to the coast? So we're like, let's go fishing. We were all about going fishing or camping or doing the outdoor stuff. Well, when I became part of this family, and I was part of the family when we were in high school, for the most part, because we were very serious. We met in 7th grade, and we did that boyfriend girlfriend thing in 7th grade, and then we went our separate ways, and then we got back in as freshmen, and we've been together since we were freshmen in high school.
So we're talking, in terms of context, how many decades? We're talking 40 years? 45?
77?
Yeah, since 77.
Since 77? Yeah, so we were together, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever you want to call it, But Salmon, I think the first introduction to her family was at Christmas, probably. And to me, so the Solis family, that home on 106 Carmen, so I know the square footage was 996 square feet because we bought that home and refurbished it. They put every one of those children, the 6 children and their children, in that home on Christmas. Everybody. And for me, that was way too much closeness. Honestly. And it freaked me out.
And then in my family, the men eat first, then the children,
and then the women.
And in his family, everybody eats
And
together.
we all sat down together,
I'm like, you gotta go eat with the men.
I remember telling her mom and dad, no, I'll wait for Cindy. And they're like, Fred, sit down. Okay.
Now, forgive me for taking a sidetrack. So the Solis protocol was at the table.
The men eat first, then the children, and then the women.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had never heard that before.
Yeah.
And I think for us, it was probably because of the space.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can only get so many people on the table.
And that was,
But the
for
priority,
me, that was unheard of. What? No, I'm going to wait for Cindy.
Yeah.
No, you weren't.
So again, how many square feet? 992?
996 square feet.
6 family members in that.
and their spouses,
And their
children.
spouses and their children.
So here you're coming from this very reserved, conservative family to almost mini chaos.
Oh yeah, it was
Master chaos.
the decibel level was something I still can't get used to. And we've been married for 41 years. Even today, the Christmases or the get-togethers, it's like, gosh, it's really loud,
But it's fun, and we're nobody's fighting with nobody.
Yeah.
There's no tension. It's just all fun.
Or even if there was before, you know what?
That day,
That
everybody
day,
forgets
it's
about
all
it.
about a holiday or the birthday or whatever, festivity.
I mean, don't get me
called
wrong.
for
We
them.
have our disagreements, but when we're together, it's just all fun.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was the shocker for me. Like, what am I getting into? This is intense.
Yeah.
I remember that. I even remember telling Maria one year, what do we get into?
And in addition to so many people, you have so many different unique personalities too. So you have the nuances of this primo and that primo, and maybe, so that's like a whole other science.
Yeah. Oh, I got along with everybody, including Miss Felice, but that's still your potential father-in-law.
Yeah.
And there's always that, like, the trick question.
Oh, yeah.
Or the, like, oh, God, how do I answer this?
Exactly. Yeah. Incredible. So Cindy and Fred, thank you so much for taking the time to allow me to have dinner at your beautiful home and serving me this wonderful dinner. In reference to my daughters, are there any parting stories or anything that come to mind that you would say, oh my God, I would love to tell this to my daughters and also my brother's children?
Just that Uncle Joe was just a wonderful person, and so kind and so caring, and a wonderful historian. He just, told us so many wonderful stories and shared so many wonderful things. And I valued his opinion, and I'm sure you're going to miss him.
Super. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Fred, thank you so much for being so good to him over the years. So God bless. Thank you.
Thank you.